Welcome back. This is then the last video of the series of videos to do this to-do app. And at long last, we are getting to the user interface part of this application. So yes, a lot of important stuff we did. We started with the two models, to-do and user. We created the to-do database. We then went on to say, well, let's create the to-do service and the user service. And these two was what was done in the previous video, where the provider will help us out to actually deliver what we have in these two classes. So that's mostly what our user interface will now be using, is only these two classes or these two Dart files, because the rest is basically done inside of this to-do database and the models. Okay, so in our pages then for login, register, and to-do, we will be using these services with provider to help us to actually show and do what we want to do for this application. Right, so let's go to the main.dart and we start off with our material app right at the start so that we know that on the initial route and on any other route that we go into, our provider can help us out. So right at the top here, I'm going to wrap this with a widget called multi-provider. And this multi-provider needs providers. So the first provider, we're going to use a change notifier provider. And the first one that we want to provide, and remember it's these two service classes that we want to provide. So it's the user service and it's also the to-do service that we want to provide. So let's go back there for this create. Let me just go back. Let's start use create, then use the fat arrow, and we want to use this user service. For the second change notifier, we will also have a change notifier provider. Again, we will use create there. And we will be creating the to-do service. Right, so these two lines, this create and this create, creates now instances of these two classes. So we have instances of both of these two files or these two classes. So we've got access to everything now in our whole app. So let's start at the start and we will go to registering a new user. So let's try and do that page first. So let's go to register new user and we can see that in order to register a new user, as soon as we click on register here, so when we click on register, we will be registering a new user in this onPressed. Right, so what will happen is the user will type something in there, his name, let's say his username. So let's say I'm using my username there, I'm using my name there. And when I click on register then, I want to have this keyboard disappear and then it needs to register. Okay, so what I'm going to do here as a start, I'm going to start with a focus manager. And this focus manager has got an instance where we can set the primary focus to unfocus. And that will just help us that as soon as we click this register button, so let me save this quickly. If I click there and I click on register, you can see it takes away the keyboard so that everything seems fine again, and then we can show that progress. Okay, so that is just to take away the focus from the keyboard so that we are left again without the keyboard on the screen. Okay, so what we're going to do then, right at the start, we want to test if the user actually entered something in both of these fields. Right, so we're going to start off and say, if the username controller.text, and that gets me the text, whatever the user typed, and we can call is empty on it to check if it is empty. Or another one also, we've got the name controller there, dot text dot is empty. So if any one of the two is empty, then we know that we want to show this snack bar. So you will remember that we've got a show snack bar inside of this dialogues file of ours. It's called show snack bar. We pass in the context and the message. And that's all. So the context is there. And the message that we want to show here, that can just be a normal string there. And the message can be something like, please enter all fields. Okay. So then if we save and the user left out one of these fields and we click on register, it will say, please enter all fields. Okay, so that's the if statement. If it's not entered, the else means that both fields are actually entered. Right, so if both fields are entered, we can actually now create a user that we want to send to the SQL database in order to register that user. So I'm going to start off with a user object, and let's call it user equals a user object. So what do we need for a user object? You will see that the parameter username is required and the name. So in order to get the username, we will go to this username controller.text, and it's always a good idea to use the method or the function called trim there. So it just trims. So if the user has a username there and he maybe used an autocomplete on the keyboard, then normally it leaves a space at the end. So that trim will just take away the space. Okay, and then we can also have the name there. So that will be the name controller.text.trim. Okay, just taking away some white space at the end and at the beginning if there is any. Right, so now we've got the new user object that we want to register, and if you go to your user service, you'll see there's get user, there's check if the user exists, there's update user, and there's create user. So we want to call this create user. So how do we do that again? So let's go back to register. So we want to go to context. So remember, we need to get help from the provider package. And for all of these, we are sending back a result. So the result is either okay or we are sending back some sort of error. So I'm going to say await, and because we have await here, you must have async at the top, but I gave you that already. So string result equals await, and then we go to context.read. So remember, for provider, you cannot use watch here, because watch will be listening for some values to change, and we are not part of the widget tree now. We are in a function. So we must use a read there. Okay, so let's just see if we can import provider at the top. So somewhere here you can just start typing provider, although it's imported in the main. So just add provider, and you can see the import has been added at the top. Okay, so we're going to go to this read. Where do we want to read from? Well, we want to use the user service, that instance of the user service, and we're going to call create user. And you can see we only need to pass in that user object that we already have, and this will register a new user. And then if something went wrong or it's okay, that result will be called there. So remember, in our user service, we say create the new user. It's sending back a string. The result for that string is okay right at the start. But if there's an exception, that result will be something else. And at the end, we return it. Okay, so let's go back to register. And we test this result now that came back from the database. So we can say if this result is not equal to okay, then we know that some sort of error occurred. And we can use that show snack bar again. And we can show that error. And that error will basically just be that result that we're getting back. That will be the error. But if the result is okay, that's the else now, we know that we have created a new user successfully. So again, I'm going to use show the snack bar. And we can say, let's say something like new user successfully created. And then if the user is successfully created, we can go to the navigator and we can call .pop, and we can just pop off the context to take us back to the login screen. Okay, so let's see if this one works. So I will create a new user, J Jurius, and I will have my name there. And if I click on register, it says new user successfully created. And you see it took some time to actually create that user now. Okay, so maybe we can also quickly do this app progress indicator to see how this one works. So if you remember, if we go back to our user service, we are using this busy create at the top. So that busy create, as soon as we create a new user, we set busy create to true. And when we're done, we set busy create to false. Okay, so let's go to register again. So anywhere where that takes a bit of a time and it seems like if your app is actually hanging somewhere, then we will do the following. So we will add this on top of the stack. So I'm going to use a consumer here. And for this consumer, I'm going to use the user service. Now for the consumer, we will need a builder there. And for the builder, we will just use this one. And what we want to return here is then this app progress indicator, but it depends on what we want to do here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this value. This value is the whole user service. Okay, so I'm going to go to that value and I'm going to get that busy create. So if it is busy creating, then I'm going to show this app progress indicator. Otherwise, I will just show an empty container, which will basically be nothing on the screen. Okay, so let's save this one and let's go and try and register somebody else. So let's take C. Norris and the guy's name will be Chuck, and let's register. And you can see through, nice progress bar, and we're done. Okay, so that is how you can do your app progress bar indicator. Right, so that is for the consumer part then, and we are showing the app progress bar. So now we've already created 2 users, but we also want to implement this focus node here, where something can change so that I can already notify the user here. If we are trying to create another C. Norris here, then if I move here, it should show this one. So this one should not show the whole time. It should only show if I'm creating a new user that already exists. Okay, so in this focus change, let's hover over this on focus change, and you can see it's called with true if this widget's node gains focus, and false if it loses focus. So we want to actually go and say if it's not true, which means it loses focus, then we want to go and see if the user exists. So I'm going to use one of those functions that returns back a result, and the one I'm going to use is context.read. Again, we're going to read from the user service, so this is all provider. So from the user service we will go and read, and I'm going to use that one that says check if the user exists, and we need to pass in that username. So the username is whatever the guy typed here. Okay, so I'm going to go to the username controller, .text.trim. Okay, so let's save that one. I don't have enough space here, so let me just add a semicolon there. Okay, so we're basically saying go and check if the user exists, username controller.text.trim. So that username controller is whatever the guy entered there, and we are sending that username now to the database to check. Now let's go to this method quickly, or this function called check if user exists. So we pass in the username, they set the result to OK. Then we get back the user. So if the user does not exist, it will actually go and throw this exception. But if the user exists, it will return back an OK. Right? So keep that in mind. If it's OK, the user exists in the database. So let's go back. So here, if the result is OK, we know that the user exists. So I'm going to test. If the result is OK, then we're going to go to context.read again. Again, we're going to read from the user service, and we're going to call this user exists, and we're going to set it to true, because now we know that the user actually exists. And if that is true, then we want to show this text widget here. Okay, so we'll set that up now. But the else part, it means that the user does not exist. So I want to also change that value back. So I'm going to use read there again. Again, we're going to read from the user service. We're going to set that user exists to false. So it could be that the guy started typing and then we set it to true, so then it's going to show. But if he types again, then that user doesn't exist anymore, so then we want to set it to false so that he can actually carry on registering. Right, and then inside of this else, it could also be that this check if user exists could actually throw an exception, because if the result is okay, there was no exception that occurred. So in this else part, we should also handle some sort of exception that could occur here. So I'm going to test here if the result dot contains, and I'm going to use a not here, because the only exception that we know that will come from here is when it tells me that the user does not exist in the database, and that's fine because that's what we're checking here. So I'm going to say if this result contains that text that we had inside of our user service. So if we scroll down, it says the user does not exist in the database, please register first. So that exception could come through, And that's fine, because then we know that the user does not exist and it's in this else part, which is fine. So we just want to test if it is that exception or if it's not that exception. So if it's not this exception, then we want to show a snack bar, and the snack bar should then show that result. Okay, so if it is this exception that says the user does not exist in the database, please register first, then definitely we don't want to show it, because that's actually what we're testing here for. So we are testing here if this user exists, then this text field should show, or this text widget should show. But if the user does not exist, we don't want to show a message, and especially not this one, the user does not exist, because that is why you're actually registering, because it doesn't exist. So I'm just checking if the result does not contain this, then only then we show the snack bar. So then it could be something else that's wrong. Right, and that's it for this part, for the focus part. Okay, so we check if the user exists. If it exists, we set this value to true, which means we want to now show that text there. Okay, and there is the text that we want to show or not show. Okay, so I'm going to introduce something new here today, and that is also part of provider, but I haven't handled this in any one of my videos. So I'm going to wrap it with a widget here called Selector. Now, this selector is even better now than when we're using the normal consumer. So you'll remember at the bottom here we used consumer, and we can actually replace consumer here also with a selector that could be better. Okay, so what the selector is doing, it's not looking like the consumer class is looking at the whole user service. And you can see that value is of type user service. So it's looking at changes in the whole user service, and then it will notify and make the change here. Where selector, you can only actually look at one specific field inside of this user service. So let's say the current user changes, or the busy, or user create. There's three things that can change in this class. But if any one of these three changes, then that consumer will update. But for selector, I can go and say, just look at this one. And if this one thing is updating, okay, then, or changed, then we will show the new values. So selector is a bit more specific even than your consumer. So for the selector, we'll need to pass in two values here. Firstly, we're going to say we're going to go to the user service. So we want to look at user service. And then the second type that we need to indicate there is the type of the value that we will want to look at. So if we go to user service, I want to look at busy create. So that is just a Boolean. Okay, so that's very important. Then after you set up that, you need to set up selector, and you're going to use this one with the fat arrow. So the first one there will always be the context, and the second one you can just call value. And now if you hover over that value, you can see it is the user service object. Okay, so I'm going to go and use that value and put the dot on it, and the value that I want to listen for is user exists. So I'm very specifically selecting one field to listen to. Okay, and then just like consumer, it needs a builder. So I'm going to replace this whole text widget. I'm going to cut out that text widget, remove the child, and I'm going to use the builder there. And again, I'm going to use that part, and we will be returning back that text widget and end it off with a semicolon. Okay, so it looks a lot like your consumer, but we are selecting and looking at only one specific value. And in this case, it's of type bool, and it's value.userExists. Value is the user service, and in the user service, we've got a field called user exists. And that's the one we actually set here to true and to false. Okay, so only when that specific value changes, then and only then will this text widget update. Right, so let's look at this text widget now. So this value now in the builder, you can see it's that Boolean, which means it's this user exists. So what I'm going to do here for this text widget, because it's already done, I'm just going to test that value. If it's true, then we want to show this text widget. Otherwise, a ternary operator, the otherwise will be just an empty container again. So a lot same that we did here at the bottom, where we said if it's true, then show the progress dialog. And if it's not true, then show an empty container. So an empty container is just basically showing nothing. Okay, so if we save now, you can see, let's go to C. Norris. Let's click there. C. Norris is already in the database, so yes, it will show me this. So now I can go and change something else. Let's say J. Rambo, which is not in the database. If I move away, that message disappears. Okay, because J. Rambo is not yet in the database. Right, so let's go to the bottom, and instead of using consumer here, let's see if we can also use selector here. So for selector, we're going to use the user service again, and the value that we are looking at is, again, for this one, if you go to the user service, it's this user or busy create. It's called busy create. So that busy create is also a Boolean. Now let's have the selector there. Make that context, this one value, and then we will go and say value dot, and we want to use busy create. And now this value becomes that Boolean, which is just busy create on its own. So we can just say return. If it's true, busy creating, show the app progress indicator. Otherwise, show the container. And now it's a lot more specific because it's looking only at one specific value inside of this user service. And it's a lot more performant because if current user changes and busy create, or let's say just current user changes, then we don't actually want to go and update this progress indicator or whatever. We don't want those updates to run, only when that specific value changes. So selector is even a bit more specific than consumer. So it looks at a specific value. Okay, so I think for our register page, we are actually done. So let's create J. Rambo here. And let's say he will be John. And we register. It shows that app progress bar. And then we're done. Right, so let's go back there. And let's type J. Rambo now again. Click here. You can see it already exists. Please choose another one. Okay, and even if I go now and I say, well, this one is John again, and I try to register, it will tell me this user already exists in the database. We cannot do it. Okay, now let's go to the screen. That is our login screen. So we are done with the register page, and it's working quite well. We've got a new user created there. Right, so now inside of the login page, we've got this continue button. So we need to enter the username and then click on continue. So when we click on continue, it takes us into this on pressed, and it will take us to the to-do page. So for now, I'm going to remove this line. So we will add it there as part of our if statements to go into this to-do page. So again, what I'm going to do is to use that focus manager.instance.primary focus, and I'm going to make sure that we unfocus that as soon as we click on continue, so the keyboard disappears. Now I'm going to check again, like we did in the previous one, if the username controller.text.is empty, then we do not want to take the user anywhere. We must tell the user something. So we're going to show the snack bar again, and the snack bar message will be, please enter the username first. Right, then we're going to go to the else part. So if the username is then entered there, then we want to go and see if we can allow this person into the to-do list. So I'm going to start off with a result because we send back a result through all of these functions that we used. I'm going to use await, go to context.read again, and we want to read still from the user service. Now on that user service then that we're reading from, we want to go and call. Okay, provider is not imported yet, so let's go to the top somewhere here, and let's just type provider there to get that import statement at the top. So make sure you've got your provider import statement before you start using read. Okay, so then here we want to go and call get user. So we're going to call get user there because we already registered the user, so we want to make sure that we get the user back now. Okay, so we need to set that current user also. So if you have a look at your user service, if we call get user and we pass in that username, we are actually setting the current user there. And then it's going to notify the listeners. Okay, so let's go back. So we want to pass in the username there, which will come from the username controller.text. And I'm just going to use trim again to make sure that there's no empty white space. Right, and then we can test that result. If that result is in fact okay, then we're going to show a snack bar. Sorry, I'm going to say if it is not okay, we will show the snack bar and just show the result there. Okay, the else part is the result is okay, and we want to actually now take the user to the next screen. So then we want to first get that username, context.read, and then we can read from that user service, and we can also go and call the current user and get the current user's username. Okay, so that's how you can get the username, although it should be the same username as from the username controller. Then I'm going to call context.read. Again, this time it will not be the user service, but the to-do service. And what I want to do here is to actually get the to-dos for this specific user. So then I'm going to call context.read to-do service, get to-dos, passing in the username, and that will get me all the to-dos for this specific username. So if we go back to user service, not user service, to-do service, you can see there's get to-dos. You pass in the username, and it gets you a list of all the to-dos. Okay, and then it notifies the listeners. Right, so let's go back to the login page. So this is what we want to do even before we go to the next page, which is the list of to-dos. Okay, so we get the username back of the current user, and then we read the to-dos, so we get the to-dos. But you could have also just used username controller.text here. That would have also worked. Right, and after that, we will call navigator.of context, and we will push a named, and where we want to go is to root manager.todo page. Right, and that's basically all that we want here. So we move the focus away from the keyboard. We check if the user controller text is empty. We show, please enter your username. For example, if I click continue, please enter username first. The else part, we actually go and get that user, see if it exists. If the result is not okay, then something went wrong. So we will show the snack bar with the exception. The else part is that user actually exists, and we can get the username, pass the username to the get to-dos for the to-do service. We get all the to-dos, and we go to the next page. Okay, so let's see if this works. So let's go and say, I think we used J Rambo, and I'm just going to say continue. And that takes me to John's to-do list. But remember, we haven't changed John there. Although John Rambo's name is actually correct, let's take my own name there. So I'm gonna have J Jurius there, and I'll say continue. You can see it's not Johan there. Okay, so let's go and change our to-do page now. So we are done with the login page, and we're done with the register page. It's working as expected. Right, so let's go down. We will get to that dialog now. Let's go to this part where we actually display the user's name. Okay, so in this padding, we want to show on this text widget now, we want to change the text here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is to wrap it with a widget, and I'm going to use Selector again. So again, for Selector, in this case, it's still part of the user service because we want to show the user's name. So it's going to be the user service, and the user's name will come from, so if we just quickly have a look there, will come from this user called current user. Okay, so we will be only listening to this current user. Right, so let's go and look at the type there. So the type for the value that we want to listen for is of type user. And we will import it from this user class of ours. Okay, then we're going to use the selector. Let me just import provider first. Okay, and then we're going to go and use selector. Use the first one. The first part will be context. Second part will be the value. That value is then the whole user service object, and we will be listening to only one value there, and that's the current user. Okay, and then we need a builder for this text widget. So I'm going to take that whole text widget there, cut it out, remove the child, type builder there, wait a bit, using that one, say return, paste back the text widget, and end it off with a semicolon. Okay, so now I am listening to one specific value, and that's just the current user. So if the current user changes, we will go and change the name there for that current user. Okay, so we just want to replace John there. Okay, so this value, you can see it's the user. Okay, so what we want to do then in this part there is I want to use string interpolation there. I'm going to go to that value, that's the current user, and the current user has got a username and a name. So we want to show the name. Okay, so if I save, you can see it's Johan's to-dos list. Okay, so now it is working fine, and I'm watching only one specific value, which is the current user, in order to update this name. Right, while we are here, let's also go down and let's set up this list view quickly. So for this list view.builder, I will wrap this also with either a consumer or a selector, but if you look at your to-do service, there's actually only one thing we're providing, and that is just this one field to do. So whether you're using now selector or consumer, it really would not make a difference. Okay, so let's go back to our to-do page, and over this list view.builder, I will just wrap it with the consumer. The consumer will listen for that to-do service, and we will use the builder there. So for this list view.builder, I'm going to take this whole list view.builder, I will cut it out, replace the child with a builder, and then use that one to return what I cut out now and end it off with a semicolon. Okay, so there's my consumer then. It will listen for the to-do service, and that value is the instance of the to-do service. So what I want to do here for the item count is I'm going to go to that value dot, and if you put the dot there, you can see there's my list of to-dos. So I'm going to use that list of to-dos dot length. And that's the item count. That's the number of items I want to show here. So currently it should be 0. So this card should disappear now as soon as we start saving. And then the item builder. For this item builder part, we want to just return back a to-do card. So I'm just going to delete everything inside of this to-do card. Okay, so what we want to pass in for this to-do card is a to-do. Okay, so where are we going to get that to-do? So that one is also very easy. We will need to go to the value dot to-dos, and we want to pass in one specific value. So, and that will be the index. And then you can see Johan's to-do list is now empty. Okay, so what we're doing is value is the instance, to-dos is the list of to-dos, and by using the index value, I'm getting one specific to-do. But because this length will currently return back 0, because we do not have any to-dos for this user, we will see an empty list. Okay, but as soon as we will use this plus sign now to enter new to-dos, we will see them displaying here. Right, so that is just the consumer part then for my list view builder. And now we can go and create this new to-dos for this user. Okay, so this is the save button, and this is here where we want to create new to-dos. Right, so the first thing that we want to do, if it opens up, we want to make sure that the user actually typed something there before he clicks on save. Okay, so we're going to test if, so we call this one the to-do controller, .text is empty. So if it's empty, the text, then we show the snack bar again, and the message that we will show there is please enter to do first and then save. Something like that. Okay, and then we end it off with a semicolon. Okay, so that's the if statement. If the user did not enter anything and he clicks on save. So let's just save this side. The user did not click anything there and clicks on save. Just cancel. Try again. He clicks on save. We want to say please enter to do first, then save. Okay, so then the else part there is that the user then actually entered something, and we want to save this new to do. So the first thing I want to do is to make sure that I get the current user, because I need to save these to dos for the current user. Okay, so I'm going to say a string username equals, we're going to use a wait context dot read. So the provider will help me with this. From which class do we want to read? Well, it will be from the user service. So the user service will help me with that current user. So I'm going to get the current user, and I'm going to get the current user's username. Okay, so now I've got the username of the current user, and I can now start creating a new to-do. Okay, so let's create a new to-do. Let's call it to-do equals to-do. And what do we need to save for a to-do? So if you look at this, we need created, we need username, and we need title. And you remember for to-do, this username title, the done is automatically set to false. So we don't need to set it. So we just need to set the username, the title, and the date it was created. Okay, so let's start with the username. We already have the username. Right, now let's set the title. Well, we have the title also. It's the to-do controller.text.trim. Okay, and then the last one is the date and time it was created. So let's go with created. We will use the date time class, and we will just use now. And that will send the date and time as it is now. Right, so there's our new to-do object, and now we can just send that to-do object to the database. But the first thing that we want to do now is to first make sure that we do not have a duplicate value here. Okay, so I'm going to do the following. I'm going to say if context.read, and we want to read from the to-do service again, .todos, and I'm going to use the contains, and then it's going to check for a specific element inside of that. And what we want to check for is this new to-do object that we just created. So you guys remember that double equal sign that we used in the to-do, this one operator here, it's now actually using this operator to see if we actually contain this value inside of this to-dos of ours. So it will look at the current list of to-dos of this current user, and it will go and have a look and see if this one exists in it already. By only checking, let's go to the to-do, by only checking the username and the title. Okay, so let's go back. So if this one contains that to-do, then we know it's a duplicate value. So I'm going to say show the snack bar again, and we will tell the user, well, we're not going to save this now. Duplicate value, please try again. Right, and then we can end it off with a semicolon. Okay, so first we check if it's not empty, or if it's empty, we show please enter to do first. If it's not empty, the user types something. Then we get the current username, we create the new to-do with all the data we need, and we go and check if that to-do actually is in the list of to-dos already by using that double equal sign operator. If it is, we will show the value duplicate value, please enter again, and just see where it ends. And the else now means everything is fine, it's not a duplicate, and now we can actually start adding it to the database. So then I will go to string result again, equals await, go to context.read. We want to read now from the to-do service, and we want to call create a new to-do. And we will just be passing in that to-do. Right, and then that create to-do will either give me back the result as okay. So we need to go and test this result. If the result is equal to okay, then we can show that snack bar again. And the message that we can show there, new to-do successfully added. Right, then the else part is something actually went wrong, and we can again show the snack bar, but this time we will show that result, and that result will then not be okay, so it will be something else. Okay, and maybe if we added that new to-do successfully, we can go back to the to-do controller.text, and we can set it to some empty text again, just to make sure that the next time the user clicks, that value will be empty and he can add a new one. Right, then right at the bottom then of this, we will call navigator.pop again. So just to make sure that this dialog actually closes down. Okay, so let's see if we can add a new to-do here. So I'm going to use milk here. Actually, let's cancel first. Let's rerun this whole thing and see if everything works now. Okay, so let's go with my username that I've used there. And I'm going to click on continue. There's my to-do list currently empty. I'm going to add, let's say milk here, or let's say, yeah, let's just add milk. I'm going to save, and there you can see new to-do successfully added. That's milk. Now, if I click again, I can type milk again with lowercase, for example, and save, and you can see duplicate value. So it's not allowing me to add milk again, even if I have everything uppercase there, because we tested in that double equal sign operator. We tested for 2 uppercase, or everything in any case 2 uppercase to check. Okay, so it won't allow me to add bread or milk again, so bread will be fine. Okay, and you can see it's not sorted alphabetically, it's sorted in the way that you're actually adding it. Okay, so let's put a zebra there and save it, and you can see zebras at the top. So it's not sorting by title, it's sorting by the date. Okay, and now we just need to do this part there also, so that we can actually also delete it. So we've got all the items that is added to the list now, and that seems as if it's working fine. So if I go out now and I use a different username, we've got a C Norris also, and I go back, I will see Chuck's to-do list. But if I want my own now, I will need to add my username, and I will see my to-dos again. Okay, working as expected. So let's just do this checkboxes there and also to delete it. Right, so let's just go down into our to-do card here. And the only thing that we actually need to do is this onChanged, because this to-do is already set using that done. And this whole list view is actually listening for this consumer. So it will rebuild if something changes, and it will send the new data through to the to-do card. So we don't need consumer or selector in here. We already have it as part of the list view builder. Okay, so inside of this onChanged, if we click there and it changes, we want to do something here. So we've got a function inside of this to-do service that we called toggle to-do done. We pass the to-do, it will go to the toggle to-do done. This function there, if you click on it, will change the value from true to false or from false to true and update it in the database. Okay, so let's go back to our to-do page, and we want to call that specific function. So we're going to say string result equals await context.read again. And we want to read this time from the to-do service again. And then the function that we want to call here is toggle to-do done. And we're just going to pass in the to-do. And the to-do is already passed in here. We've got the to-do right at the top. So we're passing that to-do to the toggle, which means it's going to toggle that to-do, and it's going to notify all the listeners. And then the only thing that we want to do here is to go and say, well, if this result is not equal to OK, then we want to show that snack bar again. So we're going to show the snack bar, and we will show that result. For the rest, it should be fine, which means that if I click there, you can see it changes. Click again, changes back. Click change, click again, working as expected. Okay, so now with this, maybe we want to have a strike through on this milk, bread, and zebra as soon as you click on it. Right, so for that, you will see that in the bottom text that we've got there, so we've got the subtitle text, and then we've got the title text, which is zebra, bread, and milk. You can see that I have a decoration that's currently set to none. So the only thing I want to do here is to go to this to-do object, check that done value, and if it is done, then I want to use text decoration dot line through. Otherwise, there will be none. So let's save it again. You can see that one is strike through. If I click it, the strike is gone. If I click it again, strike through. Okay, same for milk, bread, zebra. Okay, working as expected. And even if I go out, let's leave zebra as that. Go back. Let's add, let's go to C Norris, which is a new user without any to-dos. Let's go back. Let's come back to mine. And zebra is still strike through. So it's saved to the SQL database. Right, then the last thing is we need to actually delete this. So there's the delete button. So for every single one of these, you've got this delete button, and we can go and delete them if we want to. So currently not working. So it's this part there. There's the async for it, or the on tap, and let's see if we can delete them. So to delete them, we will go to string result equals await. Go to context.read. We want to read from the to-do service, and we want to call delete to-do, and we're just going to pass in this to-do, and that will then delete the to-do. Okay, and then we can test again. If the result is in fact okay, then we want to show the snack bar, and we can say something like successfully deleted, and the else part we can show the snack bar again, and but this time show that result, which could contain then an exception. Right, and that's it. So maybe you wanted, sometimes it's maybe better if you just scroll and you click on delete, do not directly delete it, but maybe pop up a dialog and asking, are you sure you want to delete? And only when it says yes, then you delete it. But in our case, I mean, it's so easy to add a new to-do that in our case, it must go fast, and then it's deleted. And you can see successfully deleted, milk, successfully deleted, and it updates automatically. Right, so I think that we are done with this application. Okay, so let's just have a look at this again. So if you want to go and register, and you want to register for somebody that already exists, so I already exist, if I go there, it will tell me I'm already existing. So let's use let's say P Pollock, and that user does not exist. So let's say this is Peter Pollock. I'm registering. Okay, and now I can go in with that P Pollock, go into it. Peter's to-do list is empty. He can add some bread for the to-do list to buy. He can add, let's say, some milk that he needs to go and buy. And if he wants to go and add some more bread there, then it will tell him it's a duplicate. Okay, so we can mark them off, and we can also delete them. Right, and then if I go back, and for P Pollock, you will see there's only milk that's got a strike through. But for myself, if I go in, I will have bread that's not strike through. Okay, and that is basically creating an SQLite application in Flutter, a working to-do list. I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos to create this app. I'll see you in the next one.